Greetings, and welcome to a film entitled Recording in Progress, a look at the government surveillance involved within the NSA and media examples of government surveillance.
Edward Snowden has just taken responsibility for one of the biggest government leaks in U.S. history.
We learned that the government has the capacity to track virtually every American phone call and to scoop up impossibly vast quantities of data across the internet.
Revelations that the NSA eavesdropped on world leaders.
If you've ever been to the Bahamas, the NSA could have recorded your phone calls and stored them for up to a month.
Yet all that information was exposed by Edward Snowden, and it is still kind of incredible that a 29-year-old contractor was able to steal top-secret documents from an organisation that literally has the word security in its name.
People go about their merry lives and live in ignorant bliss. One has to wonder, are they ever truly alone? With all of the advancements in technology and media, the threat of someone always watching you grows every day, and people have no idea that it's happening.
I don't know. You think he's coming?
Yeah, he's coming.
Because my argument is, why would he, when you think about it?
Okay, it turns out there may be a bit of a problem because our Russian producer booked us in a room directly overlooking the old KGB building and the home of the current Federal Security Bureau. And we've just been told they know we're here. So, so that happened.
Why did you do this?
The NSA has the greatest surveillance capabilities that we've ever seen in history. Now, what they will argue is that they don't use this for nefarious purposes against American citizens. In some ways, that's true. But the real problem is that they're using these capabilities to make us vulnerable to them and then saying, while I have a gun pointed at your head, I'm not going to pull the trigger.
It may just be my imagination. Whatever it is that's watching, it's not human.
Now, the clip of A Scanner Darkly that we just watched is definitely a good example of how the government is using surveillance as a tool to keep the masses at a minimum threat of rebellion, and also use the surveillance as an argumentative tool to say that, you know, the government is just doing its job.
Oh, baby, come on. We're all alone.
I'm chilly.
Okay, guys, that's it. Let's go. We got a job to do. Your basic human needs disgust me. Get out of here. Do we have temperature control in this sector? On it.
Hey! You know half the organic memories you have are junk. Just not trustworthy. With half the population, you can implant false memories.
You know when you suspect something, it's always better when it turns out to be true.
Now, the clip that we just watched from the BBC program Black Mirror, the episode entitled The Entire History of You, really gives the power of surveillance to the lower masses, not the government spying on everyone, but pretty much everyone being a surveiller of their own. Clive Thompson mentions this as a term called sousveillance, which comes from the French word for surveiller, but it's pretty much the monitoring of events not by those above, but by those below. So it's not the single government looking in on everyone else, but it's pretty much each person being a surveiller to the entire area surrounding them, which could also be viewed as good, as more of a protection aspect, but could also be negative because there's always the whistleblowers that then take it up to the higher ups, kind of like how Edward Snowden did.
It's no longer there.
Time frame?
13 minutes.
Investigator from the
Now, what we can see in this clip of Minority Report is the government using surveillance as a tool to help the masses, like I mentioned earlier. Tom Cruise's character is a detective that's part of the experimental pre-crime unit that uses three fortune tellers who are all siblings to help predict which crimes are going to take place, when and where they're going to happen. Of course, they can't simply rely on the precogs. They're going to have to know where people live, what their identifications are, and various other personal information like that as well. So they're actually using that information to pinpoint when it's going to happen, where it's going to happen. So there's always an eye in the sky viewing, and they're not viewing it as anything wrong, simply because they are doing this as a public service, because they are actually a branch of the government with the police force. So what they're doing is in fact a public service, and actually their job to survey everyone in the area and view that as a protection aspect rather than a threat aspect. Now, kind of expanding more on the eye in the sky aspect that I was just talking about is as you're walking through the different parts of the city, these different cameras, they catch your eye, and then they trigger a very specific, very personal advertisement that simulates just what happens on the internet within the last few years, where all of the cookie files that the NSA is gathering are also being used by advertising companies to display ads that will deal very personally with the person who is viewing them, and is kind of more of that, you know, they're keeping an eye on you, keeping tabs on you, kind of making sure, you know, what ads you frequent, which ones you really don't, and that way you're always kind of being watched, even not necessarily for surveillance purposes, you know, trying to protect against terrorism or anything, but just constantly watching your every move, so that they know just how to push the exact right buttons to get you to act in their favor. Now, in this clip from Men in Black, the government is not viewed as, you know, as a threatening element, or viewed as like an evil corporation or anything like that. They are simply an underground government system that the government isn't even really able to talk about, kind of similar to the NSA, but they are keeping all of the aliens that they're monitoring. They're making sure that, you know, everyone does their part, that no one does any violent acts or anything like that. But then this kind of shows the grid work about how, you know, as Agent K, Tommy Lee Jones' character says, you know, everyone on that screen is an alien, and Jay always had his suspicions but wasn't really sure. And later in the film, Agent K talks about how, you know, there's always a threat going on. I believe he says there's always a Corellian battle cruiser or a death ray that's aimed at this miserable planet. The only way that these people get on with their happy lives is that they do not know about it. And I believe that definitely goes with this concept of surveillance, that not too many people really pay attention to the fact that there is a chance that the government is listening in on your phone calls, checking your emails, and just harnessing all of that information. But many of them view it as, you know, as long as it's a public service, then as long as they're not linking me to any terrorist acts, then everything will be fine, which is why a lot of people fall victim to the government taking advantage of just how much information they can hold and withhold from the public. Now, of course, the government doesn't really want to talk about the concept of surveillance, because they will, no matter which way they spin it, they'll make themselves look like the bad guy. So if they were to tweak it to kind of make themselves seem more appealing, it would probably go a little something like this.
Hi, America! I'm back! Just a few weeks after telling you that snooping on 100 or so reporters was no problem, Snuggly the Security Bear is back to tell you that snooping on, all of you isn't a problem either. Even though we said that we only snoop on terror suspects and the people talking with them, turns out, in order to do that, we have to snoop on everyone. And remember, we're just tracking and storing metadata, which means your phone number, who you called, when you called, where you were standing when you called, how long you talked, what kind of phone you talked on, who you called again, and who called you back. But don't worry, we're not listening to the actual call. And if you happen to be using the internet, we'll be there too, ready to get your emails, videos, chats, search words, and photos, all to keep you snugly and secure. It's all perfectly legal. He said you can't have 100% security and also 100% privacy. Or better yet, don't ask at all. And remember, we're watching you. All of you!
Now, in conclusion, there are two sides to the argument. There is the negative side where everyone's becoming paranoid because NSA pretty much has unlimited power to gain any form of personal information such as phone records, emails, stuff like that. But there's also the positive aspect where, yeah, all of that information is being taken and stored, but they're not using it for personal gain or anything in that nature, kind of as a big evil corporation. They're collecting all of that information if they need to use it in the future to prevent any terrorist acts. Thank you for watching my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed Recording in Progress.